Coming soon to audiobookey.com. She was first molested by the age of 2. And for the next 6 years, she would be repeatedly molested by the same family member. In her world, she thought things were normal until she found out the truth. The only thing that saved her was the birth of a newborn child. Listen to this real-life story of Monique Dixon entitled Saved by the Baby. Her riveting story takes you on the same emotional journey of dealing with the effects of child molestation and how she survived it. Recommended for anyone with children. This story is rated mature. Coming soon to audiobookey.com. Real stories by real people. She's a mother, a wife, a God-fearing woman who worked as a nurse, healing the world of its problems and diseases, until she finds out she's at the final stages of breast cancer. In the book Challenge, listen to the real-life story of Diana Caracas as she takes us on her journey of overcoming cancer. It's not that she beat cancer, it's how she did it. Coming soon to audiobookey.com. Real stories by real people. And now, for your featured presentation. Forgiveness, A Path to Heaven's Gate by Ulysses Slaughter. Losing my mother, Clarice, to bullets fired by my father, Ulysses, was overwhelming. Finding my mother bleeding to death was no small matter for me, a 12-year-old child at the time. How could I forgive such a trespass? It took time, lots of time. In addition to my time requirement, forgiveness required a desire to be released. I did not want to feel what I was feeling. I did not want to feel the pain of self-hatred. I did not want to carry the burden of revenge. I needed to be released, or I would suffocate in my own toxic air. Without a doubt, we have a choice. We have a choice about what we want to forgive. We have a choice as to whether or not to forgive. We have a choice about how we forgive. And we also have a choice about how we define forgiveness. You have a choice. Choice can be a gift. Choice can be a curse. Whatever you call it, choice brings results. Because whatever result you are wanting from the choices you are making, you will more than likely get them. The following narrative is grounded in my understanding, expressions, and experience of forgiveness. I have hated deeply. I have hated with endurance. I have hated my father. I have hated God. I have even hated myself. I thought I had good reason to hate. Refusing to forgive made sense to me. Until one day it stopped making sense. Hating made me unbalanced and unstable. I needed to release the hate inside of me. Maybe these following thoughts will make sense to you. Maybe they don't. Maybe they will someday. Maybe they won't. The choice is yours. Hello, this is Chauncey Wyatt, the founder and president of audiobookey.com, coming to you live and uncut to say thanks for taking the time to listen to real stories by real people like you and I. You can listen to all of our stories for absolutely free by clicking on the play button when you see it advertised on Facebook, or simply visit our website, www.audiobookey.com. Likewise, if you'd like to tell your story and become an author of your own high-definition cinema audiobook, you can do that at no cost. And while we may take the risk in time and cost to produce it, we will still give you 50% of the book sales for non-commercialized copies sold on our website, as well as occasional bonuses, recognition, and more. So continue to listen to these amazing stories, like us on Facebook, or let us produce your story, because your experiences have value and could help someone along the way. So support Audiobookie, and we will continue to bring you real stories by real people. Thanks again for your support. Now back to your featured presentation. Enjoy. Our inability to forgive infuses empty lies with sustained power. Our inability to forgive binds precious energy and shapes it into a life-threatening cancer that infects and deteriorates our bone marrow. No life-sustaining progress or significant advancement, no healthy growth can be or will be made without forgiveness. Mostly discussed as a moral imperative, the expansive concept called forgiveness has often been reduced to simply an act of accepting an apology. Forgiveness has been reduced to simply excusing an offense by one who has erred in judgment. While these are indeed illustrations of forgiveness, there are other deeper examples manifest through these complex circumstances. There are illustrations of forgiveness that profoundly challenge the simplicity of simply accepting an apology. In these examples, we see the depth and power of forgiveness. And be sure that forgiveness is powerful. Forgiveness is transformative. The periodic practice called forgiveness should be expressed as a never-ending daily lifestyle that leads straight to heaven's gate. Forgiveness should be the way every day. Now, the previously stated notions might sound lofty. Can forgiveness really reveal heaven? Well, I know it can. And I know it is the only way to heaven's healthy gates. However, in many cultures, we are introduced to all kinds of high-priced remedies and tortured by maniacal messages that insist we need therapy or medication through the digestion of a pill if we're going to heal. If the previously stated heavenly notions sound lofty, it is because we are overwhelmed by lies, bombarded by deceitful prognosis, and leached upon by zombie-like parasites. The world would have you believe that you have no internal power over your pain. The world tells you to be dependent on outside interventions because the truth is, if you could heal yourself, a lot of people would lose jobs, profits, and sleep. They too would have to forgive and forgo. Let me state an important point here. Before we can forgive others, we must first forgive ourselves. This self-forgiveness is not simply a moral forgiveness. It is a physical, intellectual, and emotional self-forgiveness. We must forgive, surpass, transcend, and overcome our own limitations before we can forgive another. We must step outside of our own restrictions and constrictions if we are to see and help another. We must release ourselves before we can release another. In order to forgive, we must confront the matter of concern. We must acknowledge and address the matter of concern. We must address the matter with authenticity and vigilance. Only through this authentic vigilance will we ultimately see that the matters that prevent us from forgiving are indeed deceptive. Most people say that we must speak truth to power when it comes to critical confrontations. People say, tell the truth and the truth will set you free. Be clear here that truth is relative in all situations and is not as useful as authenticity. In critical situations, it is important to speak our truths always. We cannot, no matter how hard we try, speak the truth. But we still must speak the content of our minds. For a very long time, the thought of forgiving my father's offense felt like a dismissal of his actions. To forgive him, I thought, would represent a betrayal of my mother. She was my mother. He killed her. For years, he abused her. How was I going to forgive him? Now, it is easy to pontificate on this side of forgiving and reconciliation. On the other side, I thought I knew at least one truth. When I started to question my truth, I had to acknowledge that my argument, my truth, had holes. Indeed, my father shot my mother. He admitted it. But did he kill her? Here is where my personal faith is not up for debate. So I won't debate it. I will say, however, that my mother lives on. The evidence is everywhere in my world. Forgiving my father was no small matter. I don't like to compare pain to pain, but forgiving my father for murder was not easy compared to other things I had to forgive. In all cases of forgiving, I had to first confront. Confronting is the imperative. In order for me to forgive my father, I had to confront my father. Confrontation is the door that leads to forgiving. Knocking at that door is the confrontation. It is impossible to forgive without prior awareness of an indiscretion or an infraction. Awareness of the error precedes addressing the error. In my case, I knew what my father had done. I saw with my own eyes the results of his actions, but I had to forgive. As not to go too far into this extreme example of morally laced explanation of forgiving, let me remind you that forgiving is the only way to move forward in any aspect of your life. The baby who wishes to walk must first forgive the crawl. The baby must leave the crawl behind. The hiker with thoughts of reaching the mountaintop must first forgive the valley in his past. With each determined step, the hiker confronts the trail and aims toward a destiny of personal accomplishment. In order to forgive, we must confront the space that separates us from our goal. We need to close the gap and mend the rift. In the case of forgiving my father, I needed to forgive him whether or not he deserved to be forgiven. I was once asked if I would have forgiven him if he had not been contrite. In other words, would I forgive him if he did not acknowledge his wrong? The answer was yes. I had to forgive him on my terms, not his. For me to forgive him on his terms would have been dysfunctional and counterproductive. I had to forgive him on my terms. I had to forgive him based on my truth, not his. So I did. My father and I had several confrontations. That we had more than one confrontation was a sign that we were committed to an ongoing dialogue. The ongoing dialogue paved the way for reconciliation. Ultimately, my father and I moved from the act of forgiving into the process of reconciliation. Forgiving and reconciliation are not the same. Forgiving is an act. Reconciliation is a process. Forgiving can be done by one without another. Reconciliation, reunion, requires at least two. As one who advocates and has experienced radically resentless reconciliation, I can report that the process was worth it to me. Though my father has passed on, I believe it was worth it to him as well. What I call the heroic process allows us to save ourselves and help others who want to overcome. The process alleviates us from the role of victim to the state of the witness and into a world of the hero. The process, even if we must do it alone, cannot start without a confrontation. We must confront, strongly address the infraction. When we face the infraction, we can forgive the infraction. As stated at the outset of this narrative, we have a choice. The choice can be a gift. The choice can be a curse. The choice is ours. Forgiveness, a path to heaven's gate.